Hey guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Before we get into today's video, I do just have to say if the sound is different, I accidentally changed the setting on my microphone and I can't figure out where it was before, so if it sounds different, I'm gonna have to mess around with that in my next few videos and see where it was. And also, if you hear background noise, as per all of my videos, it's my dogs. We're still going through a heat wave here, so they haven't been out as much as normal and they're just going crazy. I took them for a walk just before I filmed this in hopes that it would keep them calm. That's when my hair is looking a little crazy. But yeah, so hopefully they stay quiet, but if they don't, obviously there isn't really much I can do about that. But with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. Jackie Hernandez was 23 years old at this time and was just newly a single mother to her son Jamie, and she was pregnant with her second child, who would later be named Samantha. Jackie was going through a little bit of a rough patch as she had just, again, she was newly single, she had just left a bad relationship, but she was still really hopeful for what the future held for her and her kids. And in November of 1988, her and her young son Jamie would move into a bungalow in San Pedro, California. On the outside, this home looked completely normal, and actually on the inside it looked pretty normal too, but shortly after moving in, Jackie would start telling friends and family how she had this constant feeling of being watched. Now, she would try and brush that off, but this feeling would soon escalate into hearing noises in the house and things moving around, but she simply just chalked this all up to her mind playing tricks on her. Again, she was a newly single mother, and sometimes living in a house alone as an adult can be a little bit creepy, so nobody took her claims too seriously, and she herself wasn't taking them very seriously at this time either. But soon things would take an odd turn that Jackie couldn't just dismiss as her mind playing tricks on her. And this really happened one night while Jackie was just relaxing. She was sitting, just trying to calm down after a long day, when all of a sudden something caught the corner of her eye. She turned to look and noticed that one of the objects that she had sitting on a shelf was floating in mid-air. And as soon as she noticed that this was floating in mid-air completely by itself, the item just flew directly at her as if it was thrown at her by an invisible force. This, as you can imagine, really freaked Jackie out, so she ran upstairs, grabbed Jamie, and ran to a close by neighbor's house, and she called 911. And as you can probably imagine, once the police came, they just dismissed Jackie's claims and they were really annoyed by her phone call. After this incident, these things started to happen a lot more frequently, and they would even happen when Jackie's friends and family were around, which just confirmed to Jackie and everybody else that she wasn't crazy and she wasn't lying or making any of this up, because again, this was being witnessed by not only Jackie herself, but neighbors, friends, family, whoever was in the house would usually witness something odd, whether it was small or big, or just something strange would usually normally happen at this house pretty much at all hours, all the time. One of the more horrifying incidents that happened just after this floating object incident took place happened in the middle of the night yet again, when Jackie went upstairs and opened her son's door to have a look on him just to make sure that all was well, as parents do. And when she opened the door, she was shocked to see a full body apparition of a man standing over Jamie's bed. When she opened the door, this man turned to give her this very horrifying grin, and then he just vanished into thin air. Because of how quickly things were escalating and because of how frequently these things were happening, Jackie decided to start documenting all of these things that were happening inside of her bungalow. I'm gonna pause in the middle of this video. I don't know what is going on outside of my house right now, but people are just honking like mad. This has been going on the entire time that I'm trying to film. I'm hoping that it isn't too much of a distraction, but if it is, I do apologize, and I really hope that I can edit out the sound. It seems like a good time to mention that a lot of the activity that was happening within this home seemed like it was coming from the attic. One day, Jackie was doing some puttering in her kitchen when she noticed this thick red goop oozing from the cabinets in her kitchen. She followed this oozing thick liquid and followed it right up to the attic door. Jackie, curious about what this liquid was, opened the hatch to the attic and stuck her upper body into the door. And when she did, she saw a decapitated head floating in the nothingness that was the dark, creepy attic, and it was dripping blood. When she noticed the head, just like that floating object, the head just all of a sudden like lunged at Jackie, and she obviously went down and slammed the attic door. And she would later come out and say that she believed that the head that was floating in the attic was the same face as the man who was standing over Jamie's bed. Following these events, Jackie would reach out to the very famous paranormal investigator, Dr. Barry Taff. And this case interested him enough that he wanted to take this case on. He wanted to do some paranormal investigating, and he would bring his own camera crew and equipment in hopes of catching some of the activity. One of Taft's crew members, Jeff Wheatcraft, would endure a lot of the horrors that happened in this home. Actually, it is said that he endured more of the horrors than the people who actually lived there. So on the first day that the crew was in the home, they needed some pictures of the attic, and at this point, Jeff wasn't really sure if he even believed Jackie's claims or not, and so he volunteered to go and take these photos that they needed. As soon as Jeff entered the attic, he said that he had this overwhelming feeling of being watched and just felt overall really eerie and unsettled. But before he could even think, the camera was completely yanked from his neck by an invisible force. After this incident, Jeff would flee the attic in complete terror and go down to the kitchen and tell everybody what had happened to him, but he would later return back to the attic to get back his camera and whatnot, accompanied by another cameraman by the name of Barry Conrad. Along with flashlights, the two men entered the attic to find the camera in completely two different pieces. The lens was no longer attached to the body, and both parts of the camera had been separated to different sides of the attic. Shortly after that, Barry Taft's team was done their investigation in the home, so they would pack up all of their belongings and leave for the day, staying in contact with Jackie about the severity of the haunting that was going on in the home. But then one night in September of 1989, the activity within the home would get so bad that Jackie would call Dr. Barry Taft and Jeff to return to the home in the very middle of the night because she didn't know what else to do. Jackie was home alone this night with her two young children when all of a sudden a bunch of objects in her home started being whipped around by an invisible force. When Jackie tried to put a stop to this, she was then pinned to the floor by whatever this invisible force was, and the attack was so severe that she was struggling to breathe. She then called Dr. Barry Taft, who heard this story, and obviously him and his whole team then rushed straight out to Jackie's house. When the team arrived at the home, Jeff and another photographer by the name of Gary would go up into the attic, and when they got up there, they said that there was like these orbs floating absolutely everywhere, and they could hear the snapping of fingers, and there was just an overall really uncomfortable feeling in the air in the attic, and this was enough to creep Jackie out to the point where she called both of the men down because she didn't like them being up there, and she asked for everybody to meet in the kitchen. The two men started to make their way down to the kitchen when all of a sudden Jeff could be heard screaming. It was really dark in the attic, so without any other source of light, Gary turned around and started snapping pictures in the direction of where Jeff was in hopes that the flashlight, or the flash from the camera, would help illuminate and shed some light on what was happening and why Jeff was screaming. With the light from the camera, Gary was able to make out that Jeff had a cord tied very tightly around his neck and was somehow being suspended by a wooden beam with the cord pressed against him somehow in the attic without any explanation. At first, when Gary made his way over to where Jeff was in a very dazed-like state, and he needed help being untied, but he wasn't having trouble breathing, like the cord wasn't tied that tight. And once the cord came off his neck, he was in an absolute panic just trying to get out of the attic. Because of the trauma that this experience caused Jeff, this would be the last time that this paranormal team would come to Jackie's home, and because the paranormal haunting or whatever was going on in Jackie's home was escalating to such a bad state and the spirit was becoming more and more violent, Jackie decided that it was also best for her and her family to move out of the home. In September of 1989, Jackie and her two children would move into a trailer several miles outside of town. She really hoped that this would help her get away from the trauma and the haunting and whatever was going on inside that house that they were living in previously, and she was really hoping that now she would be able to find her happiness and her comfort again. And at first, she really did feel that. But in April of 1990, she would start to experience this torment again. She would constantly hear this strange, unexplained scratching coming from the walls of the trailer. She would see orbs floating around inside of the home. But most terrifying of all is one day she was home and she saw this dark black mass floating through the trailer, and she followed it into Samantha's room, where all of a sudden Samantha's bedding, which was inside of her crib at the time, went completely up in flames. It seemed that despite what everybody else had thought, whatever this entity was had attached itself to Jackie and was now able to get outside of the home. But Jackie still wasn't the only person experiencing this, as other neighbors and stuff that she had talked to at the trailer park and her friends had all started seeing this reflection of this creepy old man constantly, when in fact a lot of the time nobody else was even around. With the haunting still continuing, Jackie decided that she wanted to reach back out to Dr. Barry Taft, who was willing to help her yet again, and decided that he wanted to use a Ouija board in this case. He tried to film the interaction with the Ouija boards, but the cameras just kept going completely black, which could have been from the spirit. While using the Ouija board, the spirit had informed them that he was a man who was murdered at the nearby docks. And Barry Taff was able to put this information together and found that this was a man who was murdered at the docks in the 1900s, and he thought that this could have been the man by the name of Herman Hendrickson, but none of this information was definite. When they asked the spirit why it was tormenting Jackie and her children, the spirit just responded by saying energy, and when asked by what kind of energy, the spirit just simply said dead. They had also asked the spirit why he had a hate for Jeff, and when they did ask the spirit this, the spirit did reply and said that Jeff had an uncanny resemblance to the man who murdered him and got away with the murder. Did try to look this up, and the man who murdered Herman Hendrickson was a man by the name of Charles Pearson, and he did have a very similar look, as I'm told, to Jeff Wheatcraft, but I couldn't really find much information on either of these men or that case whatsoever. The only information that I could find on Charles Pearson was that he was a sailor and he was suspected of murdering 2 people, but he was never convicted of either of those murders. Jackie would move several times after this incident and said that every single time the spirit or the activity within her home would happen less and less, and by her old age she said that it had stopped completely. This case is actually one of the most heavily documented paranormal hauntings ever in history because of the extreme filming that was going on by Barry Taff himself, as well as Jackie within her home, and you can find a lot of footage from this case online. Last thing that I could find on this home was that it was purchased in 2024 with the intent of turning it into a haunting Airbnb experience, but I don't know anything else about that. I couldn't find anything else about that. I don't know if it's open yet or if that's still happening or what's going on there. But guys, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.